She married a stranger instead of her sister, and he turned out to be a passionate billionaire. What she discovered later shocked her to the core. "Dad, please." Riley's voice trembled, but her eyes remained steely. "This is the last time I'm asking you for anything. I need money. It's for Mom's treatment. If I don't pay tomorrow, they'll stop her care." Anton Cooper sat in his armchair, reading the newspaper as though nothing had happened. "Riley, you know I'm going through a tough time right now," he said without even looking at her. "Business isn't doing well." "Business?" Riley laughed nervously. "You bought a new car last week." From upstairs, a sweet, annoyingly fake voice echoed down. "Anton, darling, who's shouting downstairs?" Rebecca descended the stairs in a silk robe, a venomous smile curling on her lips. "Oh, it's you, Riley. What a pleasant surprise." "Believe me, Rebecca, I didn't expect to come back either," Riley replied, crossing her arms. "I just need a loan, $40,000. I promise I'll pay back every cent." Rebecca laughed, her tone dripping with condescension. "40,000? Sweetie, do you think money grows on trees?" "Well, it seems like it grows on yours," Riley shot back. "After all, everything you want, Dad buys for you." Anton raised his voice, clearly irritated. "Riley, enough." The room fell silent. Riley took a deep breath, struggling to hold back her tears. "Dad, I just want to help Mom." Then Rebecca stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with fake sympathy. "You know, maybe there's a way to solve all this." Riley eyed her warily. "And how much does this solution cost? A wedding?" Rebecca smiled, savoring every word. "You marry Derek Barker instead of Scarlett." Riley blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" Rebecca flopped onto the sofa. "Scarlett was supposed to marry Derek Barker. Remember him? The rich guy, heir to Barker Industries?" Anton coughed uncomfortably. "Rebecca?" "But the poor guy ended up in prison for corporate fraud," she continued, ignoring her husband. "The scandal destroyed his reputation. His family disowned him, and now he's a disgrace. A criminal with no fortune, completely penniless." Riley frowned. "What does this have to do with me?" "The marriage is still on," Rebecca said, crossing her legs. "His family and he want the wedding to happen. But of course, we're not going to sacrifice dear Scarlett." Scarlett, who had been eavesdropping on the stairs, laughed mockingly. "No way I'm marrying a broke ex-con." Rebecca turned to Riley with a cold smile. "But you could." Riley took a step back, outraged. "Is this some kind of joke?" "No, it's a fair deal," Rebecca said, standing up and walking toward her. "You marry Derek Barker instead of Scarlett. In exchange, your dad and I will cover all of your mom's medical expenses." Riley stood frozen for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest. "You're blackmailing me." "We're giving you a choice," Rebecca replied calmly, almost too calmly. "And frankly, this is the only choice you have." Anton looked away, embarrassed. "Riley, your mom has always been a good woman, but I just can't afford it right now. Rebecca is trying to help." Riley stared at her father in horror. "Help? This isn't help. It's blackmail." Scarlett laughed again from the stairs. "Come on, Riley. You should be grateful. You'll marry a rich man." "Well, not that rich anymore, but still," she sneered. "And save your dear mom. It's like a fairy tale, a budget version." Riley turned to her, fury bubbling inside. "You're right, it's too cheap for you, but just perfect for me, isn't it?" Rebecca sighed, clearly tired. "Think about it. The wedding will be private. No press, no celebrations. He gets out of prison next week." Riley's eyes widened in shock. "What? He's in prison?" "Yes, but only until Friday," Rebecca smiled. "That gives you enough time to pick a dress." Riley took a step back, her heart pounding, her world spinning. "This is madness." "It's your choice, darling," Rebecca said, settling back onto the sofa, her tone cool and detached. "But the hospital is waiting for an answer tomorrow." The room fell into a suffocating silence. Riley could almost feel the ground crumbling beneath her feet. She turned to her father, her last hope, searching for any trace of compassion. "Dad, please, tell me you won't let Mom die." Antonio inhaled deeply, but his lips remained sealed. Rebecca's smile grew, a satisfied, almost predatory curl of her lips. Then, nothing. Riley closed her eyes, fighting back tears. She turned to leave, but before she could even reach the door, Rebecca's voice cut through the stillness, dripping with mockery. "Oh, and he's rather handsome, if that helps at all." Riley froze. Slowly she turned back, her eyes hardening with resolve. "Whether he's handsome or not, he'll regret ever becoming my husband." Rebecca raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh?" Riley swallowed the lump in her throat, holding back the tears, her voice unwavering. "Yes, I'm certain of it." Rebecca's smile spread wider, triumph gleaming in her eyes. Scarlett grimaced in disgust and turned away, but Antonio opened his mouth to speak. Riley didn't give him the chance. "Don't say anything. I already know what kind of father you are." She stormed out of the mansion without a second glance. Outside, a light rain had started to fall, soft, gentle, as if the heavens themselves were mourning her fate. Riley walked along the wet pavement, her heart heavy with the weight of her own decision, her mind repeating the words she'd just spoken. "I agree." Deep down, she couldn't even believe it. Marrying a stranger, a man behind bars. It felt like a nightmare, and yet, her mother's pale, exhausted face haunted her. She sighed and gazed up at the sky. "I'll do this for you, Mom. Only for you." And despite the bitter despair gnawing at her soul, a wry smile tugged at her lips. "Marrying a criminal to save my mother. Great job, Riley. You've just set a record for the worst decisions ever made." But somewhere deep within, another voice echoed, a stubborn, rebellious strength. It whispered to her that this was only the beginning of something that would change everything. The wedding day came so fast, Riley barely had time to process the reality of it all. That morning, she woke up with a heart heavy as lead. For a moment, she lay motionless, staring at the ceiling as the full weight of her decision sank in. "Today, I'm marrying a stranger," she thought bitterly. "Congratulations, Riley. You've truly outdone yourself this time." Meanwhile, Rebecca had been up since 6 a.m. "Wedding's at 11. I want everything ready by lunch," she said, flipping through paperwork, not out of excitement, but to get it over with. Scarlett, leaning against the staircase, watched the scene with a bitter expression. "So, this is it, huh? She's marrying the man who was supposed to be mine?" She crossed her arms, scoffing. How tragic. But after a moment's thought, she decided they were actually a perfect match, a pair of losers. Riley entered the room, inhaling deeply, and with a slight smile on her lips, replied coolly, "Well, at least he'll be getting a real person at the altar." Scarlett's eyebrows shot up in offense. "Aren't you ashamed?" "No, I saved all my shame for the honeymoon," Riley shot back with biting sarcasm. Rebecca sighed heavily, clearly irritated. "Enough with the drama, Riley. The driver will take you to the salon. And remember, nothing extravagant. Keep the wedding simple and quick. Oh, and you've got money for the dress, right? Because your father and I aren't paying for anything else." Riley glared at Rebecca, but kept her composure, nodding quietly. Simple and quick. The words echoed in her mind, reverberating like a cold promise of what was to come. The salon was small, the air thick with the scent of new fabric and cheap perfume. Riley tried on 5 dresses before she found one that, in some way, made her feel beautiful. The fabric was light, lace trim on the sleeves, and the innocence of it seemed to mock the tragedy unfolding around her. She looked at herself in the mirror, a short laugh escaping her lips. "No money, but I still have taste. Mom would be proud." The saleswoman smiled warmly, touched by her words. "You look stunning. This will be a wedding people won't forget," Riley replied dryly, her humor a shield against the storm inside. "I hope the groom feels the same way, if he doesn't run off before the vows." A few minutes later, Riley arrived at the small, quiet church, accompanied by only one of Rebecca's assistants, who regarded her with the detachment of someone handling a parcel. "You look wonderful, Miss Cooper," the woman said, her tone mechanical, almost rehearsed. "Oh, of course," Riley replied with a wry smile. Nothing highlights a woman's natural beauty quite like marrying a complete stranger. The church was nearly empty, just 2 hired witnesses and a priest who seemed far more bored than moved. Riley's gaze swept across the room, her stomach twisting with a mix of excitement and nerves. A perfect wedding ceremony. If only the bouquet didn't lack unicorns made of ribbon. She stepped forward slowly. The echo of her heels bounced across the marble floor with every step. each one feeling like a silent sacrifice. This is for her, she thought, for Mom. But as she neared the altar, something felt off. The groom was missing. The priest adjusted his glasses. Looks like we have a slight delay. Riley took a deep breath, forcing calm. Perfect. My groom couldn't even be bothered to show up. Then, moments later, the church doors swung open. A tall man in a dark suit entered, his piercing blue eyes as cold as midwinter frost, every step radiating confidence. The kind of man who looked like he belonged in a high-end fragrance ad. Behind him followed an assistant carrying a folder. Whispers died down. Rebecca straightened in her pew. Scarlett held her breath, and Riley froze, swallowing hard. It was him, Derek Barker. Too stunning, too composed, too out of place to be real. Strong features, a piercing gaze, a commanding presence. Oh, God, Riley whispered internally. No one said the criminal would look like a runway model. He stopped before her, adjusting his tie with a calm precision. Let's get this over with, he said flatly. Riley blinked, taken aback. How romantic. Derek didn't bother with charm. He wasn't here to impress anyone. Great, she replied, keeping her voice light. I'm not into fairy tales either. The priest cleared his throat, trying to maintain the solemnity of the moment. Shall we begin? During the vows, Riley worked hard to keep her nerves hidden. Her hands trembled slightly. Their eyes met occasionally, and in his, she caught something subtle, an unreadable, quiet intensity. When the priest asked if he, Derek Barker, took Riley Cooper as his wife, he answered without hesitation. Yes. His voice was firm, commanding almost. And you, Miss Cooper? The priest asked. Riley let out a quiet smile and whispered almost imperceptibly, At least the groom's handsome. Derek heard her. For a fleeting second, the corners of his mouth softened into the slightest, almost imperceptible smile, a small human crack in his otherwise icy armor. That was a brief but real moment of humanity, Riley thought, staring into his eyes. Yes, she added softly. The priest pronounced them husband and wife. A quiet clap echoed through the church. Rebecca whispered to Scarlett, Everything's going according to plan. Scarlett rolled her eyes. I still think this is insane. As the priest signed the paperwork, Derek remained silent, his gaze distant, seemingly fixed on something far beyond the moment. When Riley picked up the pen to sign, he murmured, You're nervous. She smirked. And you look like someone who's done this before. He raised an eyebrow. Maybe. Perfect, she said, smiling. So, you already know where the emergency exit is. As they stepped out of the church, the rain poured harder. Derek opened his umbrella and tilted it toward her. I'll get wet, Riley said. As you wish, he replied. Side by side, they walked in silence. A sleek black car waited nearby. Inside, Derek's assistant Tyler watched with curiosity. Congratulations, boss. Quick wedding, no drama. Too early to say that, Derek replied, glancing at Riley for a fleeting moment. She met his gaze, challenging. Are you analyzing me, Mr. Barker? He let a small, controlled smile curve his lips. Just trying to understand what would make someone agree to marry a man who's just walked out of prison. I could ask you the same thing, she shot back. What made a man like you agree to marry a stranger? Derek's eyes drifted to the window. Motives? We all have them. Riley gave a bitter laugh. Then I suppose we're even. The silence that fell between them hummed with something electric, a tension that wasn't quite hostility and not yet curiosity. Each of them, whether they admitted it or not, was quietly intrigued. When the car stopped at the house Derek had chosen for them, Riley braced to step out. Before she could reach the handle, Derek said, From this moment on, we'll be a couple, at least in the world. She frowned. And in our eyes? In our eyes, two strangers bound by one fate, he answered, all seriousness. That's the deal. Riley froze for a beat, letting his words settle. Relief washed through her under the surface. A small comfort that she wasn't marrying a complete stranger after all. A short, incredulous laugh slipped through her. How romantic, she thought dryly. Derek watched her get out into the rain, his voice a low murmur meant only for himself. You're unusual, Riley Cooper. That could be a problem. At the wheel, Tyler glanced sidelong at him. Sir, do we proceed with the plan? Derek's gaze never left Riley as she stood under the gray sky. Yes, everything's in place. Tyler nodded. Then the game begins now. Good luck, sir. Derek opened his door and muttered so Tyler alone could hear. She has no idea who I really am. On the porch, Riley smoothed her dress and looked up at the house Derek had brought her to, unaware for the moment that the man she'd just called her husband carried a secret that could upend her life. The house was ordinary, a single-story box inn, faded beige, plain windows, a small neglected garden. Nothing luxurious, nothing impressive. She blinked, trying to reconcile the reality with the swirl of new vows and promises. Derek shouldered in with a suitcase and wordlessly opened the front door. Riley stepped inside slowly, cataloging everything. The living room was small, dominated by a battered brown sofa, a scratched coffee table, and an outdated TV on a dark wooden stand. The walls needed paint. The floorboards complained with every footstep. She let out a soft breath and tried to sound upbeat. Well, at least the couch isn't broken. He tossed the suitcase into a corner and turned to her with a half smile. Too luxurious for a poor ex-con, isn't it? Riley couldn't help but laugh. He laughed too, unexpectedly a quiet sound like someone unused to letting themselves feel light. For a moment, they were just two people sharing a clumsy joke, and then the silence pulled them back under the surface. Derek straightened his tie and moved toward the kitchen. Riley followed, curiosity pricking at her. So, this is our home now? She asked, striving for casual. For now, he said, opening an empty refrigerator and closing it just as quickly. We'll need groceries tomorrow. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Okay, let's get a few things clear right away. Derek regarded her with interest. How clear? Rules, Riley said, lifting a finger. Rule 1, I know what you said, but it needs to be absolutely clear. In public, we're a couple. Smiles, politeness, the whole act. He nodded. Agreed. Rule 2, she raised another finger. At home, we're just neighbors. Nothing more. Understood? Understood. Derek crossed his arms, mirroring her stance. And Rule 3. She paused, then added, You don't snore loudly, do you? He arched an eyebrow, surprised, then let a soft laugh slip out. I don't know. Nobody has complained. Riley shrugged with mock gravity. Good, because if you do, I will pour water on you. He shook his head, a faint chuckle escaping his lips. I'll try not to make too much noise. Riley smiled back. There was something about him, something hidden beneath that cold exterior, that intrigued her. Maybe it was his reaction to her teasing, or maybe it was the fact that, despite the odd situation, he didn't seem like a bad person. It was still too early to judge, but at least he had a sense of humor. Night fell quickly. After a light dinner, sandwiches and orange juice, Riley made her way to the only bedroom and paused at the door. So, who's sleeping in the bed? Derek appeared behind her, glancing at the small room with the single bed pressed against the wall. You take the bed. I'll sleep on the couch. Riley turned around surprised. Seriously? Seriously. He grabbed a pillow and blanket from the closet. I'm not as bad as I seem. She wanted to say something, but just nodded. Thanks. Derek left without another word. Riley carefully closed the door and looked around. The room was simple, but clean. An old dresser sat against the wall, a window with a thin curtain let in the soft light of the night, and the bed creaked with every small movement. She sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the stillness of the night. What am I even doing with my life? But, at the same time, something inside her felt a strange sense of relief. At least Derek wasn't aggressive. At least he kept his word. He was sleeping on the couch. Small victories. In the living room, Derek was trying to make himself comfortable on the couch. He fluffed up the pillows, stretched his legs out, and crack. A loud, distinct snap echoed as one of the legs of the couch broke, and it nearly collapsed onto the floor. Well, great, he muttered under his breath. From the bedroom doorway, Riley appeared, a faint smirk tugging at her lips. Did the couch finally give out? Derek sighed heavily, trying to hold back a laugh. Riley moved closer to assess the damage. The couch was crooked now, one leg dangling off to the side. Need help? Or do you have some superglue hidden somewhere? Rolling her eyes, she disappeared into the kitchen. When she returned, she was holding a roll of duct tape and a piece of wood she had found in the cupboard. Improvisation is my superpower. Derek watched with growing amusement as she expertly secured the broken leg, wrapping the tape with surprising skill. It was almost funny seeing her so focused, completely in the zone. "Done," she said, standing up proudly. "It won't last long, but at least you won't be sleeping on the floor." He cautiously sat on the couch. It held. Impressive. "I'm actually kind of an engineer," Riley grinned widely. This time, Derek laughed. A real, genuine laugh. And in that moment, something inside Riley stirred. It was nice seeing him laugh. She started heading back to the bedroom, but before closing the door, she turned. "Good night, Derek." "Good night, Riley." The next morning, Derek woke up early. To his surprise, the couch had survived the night. He sat up, folded the blanket, and picked up his phone. He dialed a number. "I need you to find out everything you can about Riley Cooper," he said, his voice gravelly with sleep. On the other end, Tyler clearly had just been woken up. "Good morning to you too, boss. Find out everything. Family, past, debts, connections. Everything." Derek walked over to the window, his eyes scanning the view outside. "I want to know who she really is." There was a pause on the line. "Sir, maybe you should just tell her the truth." Derek's face hardened. "Not yet, but she'll find out. Sooner or later." "I understand," Tyler sighed. "I'll start today." Derek hung up and stood by the window, lost in thought. Deep down, he knew Tyler was right. But there was another voice inside him, the one that had been deceived before, that wouldn't let him trust so easily. Meanwhile, Riley emerged from the bedroom, already dressed in jeans and a simple blouse. "I'm going to return the dress," she said calmly, grabbing the bag with the wedding gown inside. Derek turned to look at her, surprised. "Return it?" "It was rented," Riley shrugged, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Why didn't you buy it?" "Your father has money." "It would have been a waste. I didn't want it in the first place." Derek fell silent. There was no self-pity in her words, no drama, just simple, disarming honesty. "I understand," he said quietly. Riley gave a small smile before walking out the door. He stood still, lost in thought, wondering what she was. So different. Completely unlike anyone he'd ever known before. Later that same day, Tyler called back. "Sir, I've completed the preliminary investigation." There was a pause. "She's not who you think she is." Derek felt his chest tighten. "Explain." "She's been working 3 jobs to cover medical bills for her sick mother. She's been in the hospital for months. No debts, no excess spending. Clean, absolutely clean." Derek closed his eyes. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." The call ended. Derek walked to the window. Outside, Riley was walking home, her bag empty. She moved slowly, like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. He couldn't take his eyes off her. That awkward gait, the tired smile, the strength hidden behind those soft eyes. He whispered to himself, "We'll see." But deep down, he already knew the truth. Riley Cooper wasn't a threat. She was just a woman trying to survive, and that scared him more than any lie could. It had only been 3 days since the wedding when Riley woke up with a crushing weight in her chest. Today was the day she was supposed to receive the promised money. Without a word, she dressed. A simple white blouse, black pants. Derek had already left that morning, saying he had important business. Riley didn't ask. They were still stuck in that strange phase of polite strangers. She boarded the bus and made her way to the area where her father's mansion stood. With every stop, with every inch closer to that lavish house, her anxiety grew. When she rang the doorbell, Rebecca opened the door. She smiled, but it was a cold smile, so cold that the air seemed to drop in temperature. "Riley, what a surprise. Come in." Riley stepped inside, scanning everything around her. The living room was exactly as she remembered it, immaculate, filled with expensive furniture and enormous paintings. Her father, Anthony, sat in an armchair, casually flipping through a newspaper as though nothing had changed. "Hi, Dad." He glanced up and immediately looked away. "Riley, what brings you here?" She took a deep breath. "The money. You promised to pay for Mom's treatment." A heavy silence filled the room, too heavy, too long. Anthony adjusted his glasses, noticeably nervous. Riley, about that, the situation's changed. It felt as though the ground had slipped out from under her. Changed? How? Rebecca stepped closer, folding her arms across her chest. The investments didn't pan out, sweetheart. We lost a lot of money. Riley's eyes widened. Investments? What investments? Anthony sighed, clearly irritated. The business, Riley. You wouldn't understand. Wouldn't understand? Her voice cracked. You use my life as a bargaining chip. Rebecca rolled her eyes. Be reasonable. We tried to help, but things didn't go as planned. Riley's insides were boiling. Reasonable? I married a man I didn't even know, just because you promised to save my mom. From upstairs, Scarlett descended the stairs with a lazy expression on her face. Oh, are you still complaining? I thought you'd gotten over it by now. Riley turned to her, fury blazing in her eyes. Gotten over it? Do you even know what it's like to wake up every morning, terrified that your mom might not wake up? Scarlett shrugged. Not my problem. Of course not. Because you've never had to fight for anything. Anthony stood up, trying to diffuse the tension. Enough. Both of you, enough. Riley stared him down, and in his eyes she saw the tears she'd been holding back, tears that she was barely able to keep contained. I did everything you asked, everything, and now you're just going back on your word? Rebecca sighed, as though tired of the whole scene. That's life, sweetheart. Sometimes things don't go according to plan. Riley shook her head, the emptiness in her chest too vast to put into words. There was nothing more to say. She left the mansion, never looking back, broken. On the bus ride home, tears fell silently, heavily. How was she going to pay for the treatment? How was she going to save her mother? When she returned home, Derek was sitting in the living room, staring at his phone. You're back, he said, not even looking up. Riley quickly wiped her face. Yeah, I'm home. He finally looked at her, really looked. Something was off. Did something happen? Riley forced a smile. No, just lost in a competition for the worst joke, a crushing defeat. He raised an eyebrow, but didn't press her. She stood up before he could ask anything more. The next morning, Riley was jolted awake by the sound of a slamming door. She went downstairs. Derek was standing there with a bag in his hands. Good morning, he said, handing her the bag. What's this? It's for you. She slowly opened it and froze. Inside was a leather bag, simple, but clearly expensive. Derek, I can't accept this. You can. He crossed his arms. Consider it a wedding gift. Riley stared at the bag, then back at him. But you're poor. Where did you get the money? He chuckled briefly. I saved, Miss Grumpy. She couldn't help but smile. Thank you. He nodded and left the house, while Riley stood there, clutching the bag tightly, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. But the peaceful moment didn't last long. That same night, her phone rang. Riley picked it up, her heart racing. Hello? Miss Cooper. This is Cedar Springs Hospital. We're calling to inform you that if payment is not made by tomorrow, we will be forced to discontinue Mrs. Grace Cooper's treatment. Riley's breath caught. No, please, just a few more days. Sorry, these are the rules. The call ended abruptly. Riley froze, staring at her phone. Panic swept over her. The room suddenly felt too quiet. She needed money, fast. Her eyes fell on the bag Derek had given her. A sharp pain pierced her chest, but she had no choice. The next day she went to a second-hand designer store and sold the bag. It wasn't enough, but it gave her a brief reprieve. She sold off old things, the watch her mother gave her, the ring from graduation. That was when Tyler passed by. He noticed Riley walking out of the store. He stopped, furrowed his brow, but didn't approach. He just watched. When Riley returned home, she was drained. She carefully placed the money in an envelope and took a deep breath, at least for a few days. But barely a minute later, the door slammed open. Derek stormed in, furious. In his hands was a check. Why did you sell my gift? Riley froze. Answer me, he shouted, throwing the check on the table. Why did you do it? She opened her mouth to explain, but he wouldn't let her speak. I thought you were different, Riley. I thought you weren't like them. His words hit harder than a scream. Like who? She whispered. Like your family. All they think about is money, profit, calculation, selfishness. Tears burned her eyes. You don't understand. Then explain it to me, he shouted, losing control. And that's when she snapped. My mom is dying, Derek, dying, and I don't have the money to save her. Silence hung heavy in the room, like a stone. Derek froze, and Riley continued, her voice trembling. I was used. I was blackmailed. They said they'd pay for the treatment if I married you. Then they left me. I was left all alone, alone. I sold that bag because it was the only valuable thing I had left. Because my mom is worth more than any gift. Derek was silent. His anger had evaporated, replaced by guilt. Slowly he approached and knelt before her. Riley, go away, she shoved him. You don't understand. I thought you were a good person. He gently took her hands, not letting her pull away. I'm sorry. Please. She tried to pull away, but he held on. Their eyes met. Something shifted. Their breath quickened. The tension between them was palpable. And then he kissed her. She hesitated, just for a moment. Then she gave in. The kiss was desperate. It held everything. Pain, anger, fear, and truth. When they pulled away, both of them were breathing heavily. I'm sorry, he whispered, his forehead resting against hers. I didn't know. I'll help. With the hospital. With everything. Riley shook her head through her tears. You don't have to. I want to. He held her tightly, as if he wanted to protect her from the whole world. That night, amidst tears and silence, they grew closer. It wasn't planned, it wasn't perfect. But it was real. For the first time since their meeting, Derek and Riley stopped being strangers bound by a contract. They became two lost souls, searching for each other in the chaos. The next morning, Riley slowly opened her eyes. A soft, golden light streamed through the window. She blinked a few times, trying to remember. The room, the bed, last night. She turned sharply. Empty. The blanket tossed aside. Derek was gone. Her heart squeezed. Of course. He regretted it and ran. Riley sat up, rubbing her face. Mixed emotions tore at her. Should she laugh or cry? Part of her hoped he would still be there. The other part braced for disappointment. But then she heard the door creak open. Her heart leaped. She jumped out of bed, hastily pulling on whatever clothes she could find, and rushed downstairs. Her heart pounded with the uncertainty of what was to come. Derek stood in the living room, holding something in his hands. When he saw her, he raised what looked like a small, crooked bouquet. Good morning. Riley froze on the last step, confused. You went out? He shrugged, a little embarrassed. Picked flowers from a vacant lot nearby. She looked at the bouquet. Wild flowers, uneven, with clumps of dirt on their leaves. Nothing special, nothing perfect. But that was the truth. Riley couldn't help herself. She laughed. You trespassed. Derek smiled slightly. Technically, the lot's abandoned, so I don't think it's a crime. Still laughing, she took the flowers and headed to the kitchen to find a vase. She found an old glass, filled it with water. Well, now we have some decoration. Derek leaned against the counter, watching her in a way that felt different, softer, with warmth she hadn't seen before. Are you okay? Riley glanced at him, surprised. Me? Yeah, and you? He nodded slowly. Yeah, me too. A silence fell between them, not an awkward one, but a new kind, like something had shifted, but neither of them knew yet. What exactly? Riley broke the silence. Thanks for the flowers. Derek smiled faintly. You're welcome. Later that same day, Derek stepped into the backyard, talking on the phone. Tyler's voice crackled through the line, cautious. Boss, are you sure? Derek stared out the window. Inside, Riley was arranging something on the kitchen counter. What exactly are you unsure about? She's good, honest. I've checked everything. No reason to doubt. Derek remained silent. Or maybe she's just a really good actress. Tyler sighed heavily. Sir, with all due respect, I think the problem isn't with her. It's with you. Derek frowned. Watch your words, Tyler. I mean it. You're afraid to trust, and if you don't let go of that fear, you'll destroy everything yourself." Derek hung up without saying another word, but Tyler's words stuck with him. What if he was right? He shook his head, trying to push the thoughts away, and went back inside. The next morning began quietly. Riley woke up in a good mood. She decided to make breakfast. After all, Derek had given her flowers, a small yet meaningful gesture. She walked to the kitchen, grabbed the coffee, the old coffee maker, and started brewing. But in her distracted state, she accidentally poured too much coffee, too little water, and forgot to turn off the stove. A few minutes later, a strange smell filled the house. Derek entered the kitchen, already dressed, and froze in the doorway. Riley stood by the stove, frantically waving a towel at the smoke. The coffee maker hissed threateningly. "What's going on here?" She turned around, blushing. I was trying to make coffee." Derek stepped forward, turned off the stove, and looked at the disaster. "Are you sure you were making coffee and not committing a crime against domestic bliss?" Riley giggled awkwardly. "At least I didn't poison you." He shook his head, holding back a smile. "The day's just starting." She playfully slapped his hand. "Hey, I'm trying!" Derek poured out the ruined coffee. Trying is one thing. Setting the house on fire is another. Riley crossed her arms, pretending to be offended. "So, Mr. Perfect will show me how it's done?" He raised an eyebrow. "Only if you promise not to blow anything up." She laughed, and the tension between them dissolved again. Oddly enough, even in the chaos, they were managing to find moments that felt like the real thing. After their makeshift breakfast, which this time Derek had prepared himself, and, surprisingly, didn't burn anything, Riley stayed in the living room, flipping through an old book she had found on the shelf. Derek was in the bedroom getting dressed when the phone rang. It was Tyler. "Any news?" "None, boss. She's clean. No scandals, no debts, no secrets. Just a woman trying to live." Derek hung up the phone without a word. He stood still for a moment, deep in thought. Maybe it was time to stop doubting. Maybe it was time to start trusting. But the fear still lingered. A tiny but persistent thing. That night, Riley went to bed early. Everything that had happened had worn her out. Emotions, worries, life itself. Derek stayed in the living room, alone, lost in his own thoughts. But after a while, he quietly made his way to the bedroom, just to check on her. Riley slept soundly. Her face was calm, her hair scattered across the pillow, and her breath steady. Derek stood there, watching her. And then she murmured something. "Derek!" He froze. Had she woken up? No. She lay motionless, eyes closed, breathing soft and even. "Don't leave." "Derek." The words were barely audible, a whisper, but he heard them. And in that moment, something in his chest tightened, sharp, relentless, a pull he couldn't ignore. He stepped closer, adjusted the blanket, and paused for a few seconds, standing beside her. Then he quietly left the room, returned to the living room, and sank down onto the couch, rubbing his face with both hands. "I'm falling." The words slipped from his lips, almost soundless, but out loud, they carried a weight, like a truth he could no longer deny. Because falling in love meant opening up, and opening up meant risking everything. Derek Barker wasn't someone who took risks with his heart, but looking at the bedroom door, he realized it might already be too late. He had taken that step without even realizing it. Now, there was only one question left. Was this risk worth the game? He leaned back, closed his eyes. It was dangerous. But, for the first time in a long time, he didn't want to run. He wanted to stay. And as strange and terrifying as it seemed, it felt right. The next morning, Riley woke up to find Derek already in the kitchen, making coffee. She stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him. Something had changed in him. He seemed lighter. "Good morning," she said, smiling. He turned, smiled back. "Good morning. Today's coffee, no smoke." Riley laughed. "You'll never let me forget that, will you?" "Never." She sat at the table, and he poured 2 cups. They drank in silence, but it was a warm silence. And in that silence, Riley suddenly realized, maybe this marriage of convenience, this crazy beginning, it wasn't the end at all. It was just the beginning. She looked out the window. Something had to be done. She couldn't just sit back and live off Derek. She needed to contribute, and then it hit her. "Derek!" she called out, excited. He appeared in the doorway, adjusting his shirt. "What's up?" "I'm going to sell cakes in jars." He blinked, confused. "Cakes?" Riley laughed. "Cakes in jars. Little ones, in glass jars. They're easy to make, and everyone loves them." He crossed his arms, thinking. "Can you bake cakes?" "Of course," she said, pretending to be offended. "Just because I burned the coffee doesn't mean I'm a disaster in the kitchen." He raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "If you say so." She smacked his arm playfully. "Trust me, we can do this." And to her surprise, he actually believed her. In the following days, Riley threw herself into the project with enthusiasm. She bought simple ingredients, cheap jars, and poured her heart into each recipe. Chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, all made with love. Derek helped when he could, washing dishes, arranging jars. But the hard work was all hers, and he couldn't help but admire her determination. "I'm going to sell them downtown," she said one day. "There are a lot of people there." "Good luck," he nodded. Riley left the house with a box of cakes, smiling like she was about to conquer the world. And in a way, she was. Meanwhile, Derek took out his phone and dialed a number. "Tyler, come get me." "Back to the company, sir?" "Yes." A few minutes later, a black car pulled up outside the house. Derek settled into the plush seat, straightened his suit that lay across the back seat, and took a deep breath. Tyler glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Are you sure, boss?" Derek didn't answer. The towering glass and steel building in the heart of Seattle, Barker Industries, loomed ahead. Derek entered through the side door, making an effort to remain unnoticed. He headed straight for the elevator to the top floor. The office was lavish, mahogany desk, massive windows with a view of the city, expensive paintings on the walls. All of this was part of a life Riley couldn't even imagine. Tyler followed him in and quietly closed the door behind him. "This is going to blow up, sir." Derek sat in the leather chair, beginning to sift through the papers on his desk. "I know what I'm doing." "With all due respect, no, you don't." Tyler crossed his arms. "She'll find out, and when she does, she'll think you've been lying to her." Derek slammed his hand on the desk. "It's better that she loves me without knowing who I really am." Tyler shook his head. "Love doesn't work that way, sir." Derek turned away. He knew Tyler was right. But the fear, it was stronger than reason. While Derek wrestled with his demons in his luxurious office, where everything smelled like money and secrets, Riley stood in the heart of the city by a cake jar stall, her smile, her weapon of choice. "Hi, want to try some?" Some people walked by without a glance. Others stopped. But Riley didn't give up. Her infectious energy soon had a line forming. "This chocolate one is just divine," an elderly woman said. "Thank you." "It's my grandmother's recipe," Riley lied without hesitation. But her charm was so compelling that no one suspected a thing. A man in an expensive suit bought 3 jars at once. "My wife will be thrilled." "I'm sure she'll love it," Riley responded with a sincere smile. By the end of the day, nearly everything was sold. Exhausted but happy, she made her way home. Derek was already waiting on the couch, his attention focused on his phone. As soon as he saw her, he quickly put it away. "How did it go?" Riley lifted the empty box, her triumphant smile shining bright. "Sold almost everything." Derek smiled. In that moment, he was genuinely proud of her. "I knew you could do it." She collapsed next to him on the couch, drained. "How about you?" He hesitated for a moment. "Same old. It's tough carrying boxes all day." Riley laughed. "I must have a terrible boss, but at least he pays and smiles." Derek smirked, but inside, everything twisted. Every lie felt heavier. That evening, they ate simple pasta with tomato sauce. Not a restaurant, not a delicacy, but made with heart. "You know," Riley said, spinning her fork in her hands, "I never thought I'd enjoy baking this much." "Why's that?" "I don't know. I always pictured my life differently. A prestigious job, a nice apartment. But now, I think I might be happy like this." Derek said nothing. Those words cut him deep. She didn't need luxury. She didn't need money. She needed something real. A few days later, Tyler entered the office holding a thick folder. "Sir, I've finished the investigation into Riley Cooper." Derek opened the folder slowly. "Speak." Tyler took a deep breath. "She has a complicated history, sir." Derek flipped through the documents, old photos, school reports. She grew up with her mother, Grace. Her father, Anthony Cooper, left when Riley was 7. He started a new family, a daughter named Scarlett. Derek's chest tightened. "Go on." "From her teenage years, Riley worked. Anything she could. Sold on the street, took side jobs, just to help her mom. When Grace fell ill, Riley dropped out of college to care for her." Derek closed his eyes. "Did her father help?" "Not once, not a cent. He only showed up at the wedding." A wave of anger crashed over Derek, then came the guilt. He had judged Riley, he had doubted her. And now, "She never needed my money," he whispered. "No, sir. What she needed was one thing: love." Derek threw the folder onto the desk and ran his hands over his face. "I'm an idiot." Tyler didn't argue. Minutes passed in silence. Part of Derek wanted to snap, rush to her, tell her everything. But fear held him back. "I'll keep the secret," he finally said. Tyler frowned. "Sir, it's for the best." "For who?" Tyler clenched his fists, anger rising. "For her or for you?" Derek looked at him with clear irritation. "Be careful, Tyler." But Tyler didn't back down. "With all due respect, sir, love doesn't need masks." The words hung in the air, heavy like a sentence. Derek felt their weight, but said nothing. After Tyler left, he was alone in the office. Slowly, he made his way to the private bathroom, glancing at himself in the mirror. There he stood, Derek Barker, CEO, billionaire, but also a coward. He leaned against the sink and exhaled deeply. "Love doesn't need masks," he whispered to himself. But his voice echoed back, cold and unforgiving. "Fear does." He left the bathroom, shrugged on his jacket, and drove home. When he arrived, Riley was in the kitchen, preparing cakes for the next day. "Hey," she smiled when she saw him. "You're early today." Derek forced a smile. "Yeah, finished early," Riley wiped her hands on her apron and walked over to him. "Are you okay?" "You look tired." Without a word, he hugged her. Riley was surprised, but returned the embrace. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice soft. "Nothing," Derek said quietly, pressing his face into her shoulder. "Just thank you." "For what?" Riley asked, confused. "For being you, just the way you are." She laughed, not entirely understanding, but held him tighter. And Derek, holding the woman he was slowly learning to love, realized he was trapped between truth and lies, fear and love. And for now, fear still had the upper hand. The next weeks were the best Riley had had in a long time. Her jar cakes were a hit. She had regular customers who came at the same time and place every week, some even placing orders in advance. Riley called the woman from the bakery on the corner. "Did you get the strawberry ones today?" Riley smiled as she handed over 3 jars. "Of course, Mrs. Linda. I saved them just for you." The woman paid and even left a tip. "You're so sweet, dear." That day, Riley returned home with a full heart and a slightly fuller wallet. It wasn't much, but it was honest. It was hers. Derek was in the living room, trying to assemble a shelf he had bought. "Need help?" Riley asked, tossing her bag aside. "No, almost done," he replied, not looking up. She watched for a few seconds, then burst out laughing. "Derek, you put it together upside down." He stopped, stared at the shelf. "No, I didn't." "Yes, you did." Riley walked over, took the instructions from his hands. "Look, side A goes into side B, not C." Derek crossed his arms, pretending to be offended. "Frank, since when did you become a furniture expert?" "Since I realized you're absolutely useless at it." She winked and started disassembling the incorrectly built shelf. Derek stood there, watching her. She could do everything. Funny, determined, smart, and he was completely in love. "Done," Riley declared proudly. "Now it's right." Derek tested the shelf. It was sturdy. "Thanks." "You're welcome." She wiped her hands on her apron. But now you owe me dinner. He smiled. Agreed. That evening, Derek made a simple dinner, grilled chicken with vegetables. Nothing special, but it was delicious. Riley ate with gusto, praising each bite. Seriously, you cook better than me. Joking, Derek replied. Careful, Mr. Perfect. I could still poison you. He laughed, and Riley felt warmth spread through her chest. She loved these moments. She loved how they were slowly getting to know each other, building something real. At least, that's how it felt to her. A few days later, Riley received a special order. A company wanted 50 jar cakes for a corporate event. 50? She asked on the phone, shocked. Are you sure? Yes, we need them. Delivered by 3 p.m. tomorrow at the Barker Building downtown. Riley wrote down the address, her excitement bubbling up. This was the biggest order of her life. She spent the entire night preparing the cakes. Derek tried to help, but she kicked him out of the kitchen. You're just in the way. Fine, boss. He raised his hands in mock surrender. The next morning, Riley woke early, packed everything into thermal bags, and took a taxi to the address she had been given. The Barker Building loomed ahead, steel and glass, cold and imposing. Riley tilted her head back, stunned. Wow. Working here must be incredible. She stepped into the lobby, carrying the boxes. The receptionist gestured toward the 15th floor, where the event was being prepared. Riley thanked her and stepped into the elevator. When the doors opened, a wide corridor stretched before her, lined with huge windows and minimalist decor. She moved cautiously, trying to locate the person to hand the cakes to. Then voices drifted from a nearby conference room. Mr. Derek, we need your approval on these contracts. Riley froze. Mr. Derek? She slowly turned and peeked through the slightly open glass door. Inside, a group of top executives in expensive suits, leather-bound folders in hand, were seated around a polished table, and in the center, him, Derek. Perfect suit, proud posture, eyes filled with steely determination. He gestured confidently, explaining strategies and investments with effortless authority. Her knees nearly buckled. The boxes slipped from her hands, crashing to the floor. A few executives glanced her way, but Derek didn't notice. He was entirely absorbed in his presentation. Riley didn't wait. She spun around and ran, pressing the elevator button repeatedly. Pressing herself against the wall, fists clenched. Tears slid down her cheeks before she even processed what she had just seen. Derek, her Derek, was here, controlling everything. He had lied. At home, Riley locked herself in her bedroom. Hands shaking, she grabbed her phone and typed his name, Derek Barker. The first result, a 6-month-old article. Barker Industries CEO arrested on corporate fraud charges. She read each word, heart pounding, eyes wide. Photos with police, bold headlines, speculation. She scrolled further. The next article, more recent. Derek Barker cleared but disinherited, loss of fortune. She frowned. Disinherited, loss of fortune. But he had just been in that building, clearly in control. She dug deeper until she found a report from just 2 weeks ago. Sources confirm Derek Barker back at the helm of Barker Industries, fortune restored. Her phone slipped from her hands onto her lap. He had never been poor. The modest house, the move, the hardships. It had all been a lie. Riley stood, burning with fury, determined to uncover the truth. She tore through her bedroom, rifling through drawers, shelves, and the desk. Then she found it. A folder, hidden deep in a drawer. Trembling, she opened it. Inside, documents, hundreds of them, and on every page, her name. Riley Cooper's financial history, school records, old photographs, detailed reports of her life. She flipped through it, stomach tightening. He had been watching her from the start. Every intuition she thought was hers had been purchased information. Tears came again, but now with rage. She slammed the folder onto the bed. You played with my heart. Her voice was low, trembling with pain. Riley ran her hands over her face, trying to calm herself, but the anger only burned hotter. She had trusted him, given herself, loved him, and it had all been a lie. At that moment, the front door opened. Riley, Derek's voice echoed through the house. Are you home? She didn't respond. He climbed the stairs and stopped at the bedroom door. He saw her, holding the folder. His face paled. Riley? His voice softened. She lifted the folder, showing the documents. What is this, Derek? He swallowed. I can explain everything. Explain? Riley's voice rose, sharp with hurt. You were spying on me. You lied about everything, about yourself, about everything. He took a step forward. I had my reasons. Reasons? She threw the folder to the floor. What could possibly justify this? Derek closed his eyes, struggling for words. It's complicated, Riley, he said, voice trembling with pain. Riley laughed bitterly. You deceived me, made me believe we were the same, that we were fighting shoulder to shoulder. He reached out, but she recoiled. Don't touch me, Riley, please. Her eyes glistened as tears slowly rolled down her cheeks. I trusted you. Derek felt his chest tighten. You can still trust me? Riley looked him dead in the eye, her gaze bloodshot from tears. How? How can I trust someone who's lied about everything? He didn't know what to say. Riley grabbed her bag and headed for the door. Where are you going? Derek asked, panic creeping into his voice. Away from you. Before he could say anything more, she slammed the door behind her. Derek stood frozen in the middle of the room, staring at the folder lying on the floor. He had just lost the one person who truly meant anything to him, and this time, no amount of money would fix it. Outside, Riley stepped onto the sidewalk but didn't go far. She stopped, taking deep breaths, trying to calm her racing heart. Where was she supposed to go? She had no money, no place to sleep. Going back to her mom in this state would only cause more worry. So she did the only thing she could, sat down on the curb, waiting for the anger to fade, for the tears to dry, for some semblance of clarity to return to her mind. Back in the house, Derek descended the stairs like a machine. He grabbed his phone and called Tyler. I need you here. Now. Minutes later, Tyler arrived. He found Derek, slumped on the couch, his head in his hands. What happened? She knows everything? Tyler shut his eyes, letting out a heavy sigh. I warned you. Derek lifted his head, fury flashing in his eyes. I don't need your lectures, Tyler. Then what do you need? Derek didn't answer. He just stared blankly out the window. Outside, Riley watched the house. She saw Tyler enter, the lights in the living room flicker on, and then she heard their voices. She crept closer, pressing her back to the wall next to the partially open window. Sir, do you have any proof that she's not after your money? Seriously. You've checked. You know she's honest. Why didn't you tell her the truth from the start? Derek ran a hand through his hair, his face contorting with frustration. There was never a right moment. And when will that moment come? Tyler crossed his arms over his chest. When she finds out on her own, like just now? I was afraid, Derek said sharply. Afraid of losing her. Riley felt her heart clench. He was afraid of losing her. So why had he lied? Tyler shook his head. And now you've lost her anyway. Derek said nothing. He knew Tyler was right. Riley pulled away from the window, her heart shattered. She understood everything now. It had all been a game. Every gesture, every word, every moment she'd thought was real. Just part of a test. She took a deep breath and walked back inside the house. Derek and Tyler turned in surprise. Riley! She raised her hand to stop him. No, now, listen to me. Derek nodded silently. Riley stepped into the center of the room, her eyes swollen from crying, but her voice was firm. You used me. That's not true. Yes, it is, she interrupted. You pretended to be poor, pretended to struggle with me, all just to test whether I was after your money. Derek took a step forward. I had to be sure. Sure of what? Riley's voice cracked. That I'm not like everyone else? That I'm not after your money? Yes. Riley let out a bitter laugh. I didn't even know you had money, Derek. How could I be interested in something that didn't exist? Derek opened his mouth to speak but found no words. Riley continued, her voice trembling. You know what hurts the most? It's not the lies. It's realizing that you never trusted me, not for a second. I trusted you, Derek insisted. Liar, Riley stomped her foot. You investigated my life, snooped through it, and even then, you kept lying. Derek lowered his head, ashamed. I had my reasons. What reasons? She stared him down, unblinking. He sighed deeply. I've been lied to before. Women who pretended to love me, but were only after my money. And when I found out about your family, Antonio, Rebecca, the people who were nothing more than money hunters who lost everything in bad deals. I thought you might be the same. Riley felt the familiar sting of tears threatening to spill over. So that's it, she thought. You judge me based on the family that abandoned me, the family that blackmailed me. Derek closed his eyes. I was wrong. You were too. Riley wiped the tears from her cheeks, her voice trembling with fury. And you know what's worse? I started to love you, truly love you, not because of what you had, but because of who I thought you were. Those words struck Derek's heart like a knife. Riley, but I fell for a lie. She turned and stormed down the stairs. Derek followed, desperation in his every step. Where are you going? Leaving. Riley stepped into the bedroom, tossing clothes into an old suitcase with frantic movements. Derek stood frozen in the doorway, his expression one of helplessness. Please, don't go. Just give me one reason to stay. Because I love you. Riley paused but didn't turn to face him. Love doesn't grow on lies. Derek stepped into the room, his voice low and pleading. I know, I was wrong, I was a coward, but everything I felt for you, that was real. Riley looked at him, her eyes welling with fresh tears. How can I trust you now? Because I'm telling you the truth. Derek took her face in his hands, his touch gentle. For the first time, I'm being honest with you. Riley pulled away, shaking her head. It's too late. She slammed the suitcase shut and moved toward the door. Derek grabbed her wrist, his grip firm but trembling. Riley, please! With one sharp motion, she wrenched her arm free. It's better to be poor and free than rich and lied to. And with that, she left. Derek stood alone in the room, shattered, the silence around him suffocating. In the doorway, Tyler appeared, watching him quietly. Sir, I've lost her. Derek's voice cracked, raw with pain. Tyler sighed deeply. You can't buy love, sir. Derek's eyes were red, and there was a bitter twist to his expression as he met Tyler's gaze. But you can lose it because of one lie. Riley hailed a taxi and headed to the apartment where she lived with her mom. It was small and simple, but it was her home. When she entered, she saw Grace sitting on the couch, watching TV. She had just been released from the hospital and was recovering well. Riley? Grace looked up, concern washing over her face. What happened? Riley dropped the suitcase to the floor and collapsed into her mother's arms. You lied, Mom. He lied about everything. Grace held her tight, stroking her hair gently. Tell me everything, darling. I'm listening. And so Riley told her the story of Derek, the lies, the investigation, how she felt betrayed and used. Grace listened in silence, nodding every now and then. When Riley finished, Grace took her daughter's face in her hands with a soft, understanding gaze. True love requires forgiveness, Riley. But Mom, I know it hurts. I know he made mistakes. Grace wiped the tears from Riley's. Begged, sometimes people do bad things out of fear. Riley shook her head bitterly. I can't forgive him, not now. Grace nodded, understanding. Then don't forgive him yet. But don't close your heart forever. Riley wrapped her arms around her mother once more. I wish he trusted me. I know, darling, I know. That night, Riley slept in her old room. Everything felt strange, like the past few weeks had been a dream or a nightmare. The next days were difficult. Riley tried to return to her old routine, selling cakes again, but her heart just wasn't in it. Derek called repeatedly. She didn't answer. He left messages, nothing. He even sent flowers, which she promptly returned. I never want to see him again, she said firmly to her mom. Grace simply nodded, respecting the pain her daughter was going through. But then, a week later, something changed. Riley started feeling nauseous, plagued by fatigue and dizziness. Grace insisted she go see a doctor. It's probably just stress, Mom, Riley said. Still, go see a doctor. Reluctantly, Riley agreed. When the doctor returned with the test results, Riley's world came crashing down. Miss Cooper, the doctor said, his voice gentle but serious. You're pregnant, about 2 months along. Riley froze, trying to process what she'd just heard. Pregnant. 2 months. Derek. She stumbled out of the clinic, her mind in shock, aimlessly wandering the streets. How could she raise a child alone? How could she deal with this? And most importantly, should she tell Derek? Or would silence be better? Riley leaned against a wall, slowly sinking to the ground as the tears began to fall. She wept for the life she had lost, for the love that had shattered, and for a future now full of uncertainty and fear. That day, Riley returned home, hiding the test results in her bag as though it were a ticking bomb. Grace was in the kitchen, preparing tea when she came in. "Well, what did the doctor say?" Grace asked, her eyes scanning Riley's face. Riley forced a smile. "Nothing serious. Just stress." Grace studied her suspiciously, but didn't press further. That night, Riley lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling. Her hand rested on her still flat stomach. She was pregnant. Derek's child. And he could never know. In the following days, Riley tried to get back to her routine. She woke up early, baked her jar cakes, and sold them on the streets. Grace watched her with concern, but respected her silence. "Are you sure everything's okay?" Grace asked one morning. "Yes, Mom. I just need to keep my mind busy," Riley replied, tying on her apron. But staying distracted was nearly impossible, especially when her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Derek called every day, sometimes several times. Riley never answered. He sent messages. "Riley, please, just listen to me. I know I messed up. Give me a chance to make things right. I just want to talk." She deleted every message, and without reading to the end. On the other side of town, Derek was falling apart. In the living room of the mansion, he scrolled through old videos on his phone, footage Tyler had taken when no one was watching, Riley laughing while putting up a shelf, Riley burning the coffee and joking about poisoning him, Riley dancing in the kitchen, baking cakes. Derek watched the clips on repeat, as if somehow it could bring her back. Tyler entered the room and shook his head. "Sir, this isn't helping." Derek didn't respond, his gaze fixed on the screen. "You need to give her time." Finally, Derek looked up at Tyler, his eyes red. "And what if she never comes back?" Tyler sighed. "Then you'll have to learn to live with the consequences of your decisions." His words were harsh, but truthful. Meanwhile, Riley was doing her best to keep up appearances, at least in front of customers. "Good morning, Mrs. Linda," she greeted a woman at the bakery. "I brought your favorite chocolate ones." "Are you all right, dear?" The woman frowned. "You look so tired." Riley forced a smile. "I'm fine, just a lot of work." "Just don't work yourself to the bone." Riley laughed, but deep inside, she knew the woman was right. That night, during dinner, Grace finally spoke up. "Aren't you going to tell me what's really going on?" Riley stopped eating. "Mom, I'm not naive. I know something's wrong." Riley took a deep breath. She wanted to tell her, but the words wouldn't come. Grace reached out, taking her hand. "Whatever it is, we'll get through it together." Riley nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "Thank you, Mom." But she didn't tell her, not yet. A week later, Riley was selling cakes at a busy intersection. The sun was beating down, and she felt faint. "Ma'am, are you okay?" a driver asked. "Just a little dizzy," she started to say, but before she could finish, everything went black. She collapsed right there on the street. When she woke up, she was on a stretcher, being rushed to the hospital. "Take it easy, miss. You fainted. We're taking you to the hospital." Riley tried to protest, but she was too weak. At the hospital, the nurse examined her and then grabbed the phone. "Let me call someone." "Do you have an emergency contact?" Riley wanted to say no, but her head was spinning. The nurse opened her contact list and saw the first entry. "Hot husband." She dialed the number. Derek was in a meeting when his phone rang. He saw an unfamiliar number and almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up the phone. "Hello, Mr. Barker. This is Seattle Hospital. Your wife has been brought here after fainting on the street." Derek's world stopped. "What? Where is she?" "In the emergency room. Can you come?" Derek didn't say a word. He hung up, grabbed his car keys, and rushed to the hospital. When he arrived, panic gripped him. "Where is Riley Cooper?" The receptionist pointed him to the room. Derek barged in and froze when he saw her lying on the bed, pale, with an IV in her arm. "Riley?" She slowly opened her eyes, and upon seeing him, tried to sit up. "What are you doing here? The nurse called me." Derek moved closer. "Are you okay? What happened?" Riley wanted to answer, but at that moment, the doctor entered. "Mr. Barker?" Yes. Can we talk privately? Riley tried to stop him. No, he can hear here. The doctor hesitated, but then continued. Your wife lost consciousness due to low blood pressure and dehydration, but the most important thing is that she is pregnant. About 2 months along. Derek froze. Pregnant? The doctor nodded. Yes, and she needs to be very careful. No physical strain. The doctor left, and they were left alone. Derek stared at Riley, still in shock. Are you pregnant? Riley turned away, tears starting to fall down her cheeks. I was going to tell you. When? I don't know, she blurted out. I didn't know how. Derek sat down at the edge of the bed, running his hands over his face. Is it my baby? Riley stared at him, furious. Of course it's yours. Who else's would it be? He took a deep breath, trying to process it all. I'm sorry. I'm just in shock. Riley angrily wiped her tears. You don't have to worry about it. I'll handle it on my own. On your own? Derek asked, surprised. You think I'll let you raise my child alone? I don't need you, but the baby does. He squeezed her hand. And you do too. Riley tried to pull away, but she was too weak. I don't need anything from you. Riley, please. He knelt beside the bed. Let me take care of you and the baby. No. Move in with me, Derek insisted. You and your mom, I'll take care of both of you, I promise. Riley shook her head. I don't want your pity. It's not pity, he said softly, squeezing her hand. It's responsibility. Please, for the baby. Riley remained silent, torn between her emotions. At that moment, Grace entered the room, having just arrived at the hospital. Riley, my God, what happened? Riley looked at her mother, then at Derek, and understood. Despite everything, for the sake of the baby, she had to accept it. A few days later, a black car pulled up to a huge mansion. Riley stepped out, holding her mother's hand, unable to take her eyes off the impressive building. Well-kept gardens, large windows, iron gates, everything screamed luxury. Derek came out of the house to greet them. Welcome. Grace looked around in surprise. It's huge. Riley stood silently, frozen in place. Derek led them inside. The house was even more lavish inside. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, expensive paintings. Riley felt like a stranger. Your rooms are upstairs. Derek pointed to the stairs. You can choose whichever you like. Grace thanked him, and Riley silently followed her mother upstairs. She stopped in the hallway, glancing around. Derek approached slowly. Are you okay? I'm here only for the baby, Riley whispered, her eyes tired. I don't belong in this world. Derek felt a pang in his chest. You belong wherever you choose to. Riley looked at him, weary. I'm here for the baby, and nothing else. He nodded, accepting it. I know. At that moment, they both understood. This was only the beginning of something complex, painful, and uncertain. But for the sake of the baby, they were willing to try. The first days in the mansion felt strange. Riley woke up in a bedroom bigger than the entire apartment she once shared with her mother. Everything was luxurious, quiet, too perfect, and she felt completely out of place. But Grace was thrilled. Riley, look at this kitchen, Grace exclaimed joyfully that morning. There are 3 fridges. 3? Riley groggily descended the stairs. No one needs 3 fridges, Mom. But I guess it's nice. Grace opened one of the fridges, marveling at it. So much space! Riley couldn't help but smile. At least Mom was happy. Just then, Derek entered the kitchen, already dressed and ready for the day. Good morning, Grace greeted him cheerfully, while Riley only nodded. I'm about to head out, but I made coffee. Derek pointed to the coffee machine. And there are sliced fruits in the fridge. Riley raised an eyebrow. Sliced fruits? He almost proudly responded, I read that pregnant women need to eat well. Grace beamed, while Riley only rolled her eyes. Thanks, she said curtly. Derek left, and Grace turned to her daughter. He's trying, Riley. I know, Riley sighed. But trying doesn't erase what he did. Grace stayed silent, but her look spoke volumes. In the following days, Derek really did make an effort. Every morning, he cooked breakfast, left notes on the fridge with reminders about vitamins for expectant mothers, even bought pregnancy books and marked important pages. Riley tried to ignore it, but it was hard. One night, lying in bed with a book, she heard a soft voice in the hallway. She slowly opened the door and saw Derek kneeling by her bedroom, whispering, "Hey, little one," or "little one." "We don't know yet." He chuckled softly. "Your dad's a little lost, but I promise, I'll learn. I'll be the best father I can be." Riley felt her heart tighten. Was he talking to the baby? Derek continued, "Your mom is incredible, strong, funny, stubborn. You're going to love her. And me too. I'll do everything I can to deserve both of you." Riley quietly closed the door, tears slipping down her cheeks. The next day she found Derek in the living room, surrounded by baby clothes, tiny onesies, booties, blankets. "What's all this?" she asked, surprised. Derek looked up, embarrassed. "I went to the store and couldn't help myself. Riley picked up a yellow onesie with an embroidered duck. You bought all this? Isn't it too much?" He scratched his neck. "That's exactly what I thought when I got home." Riley laughed, her first genuine laugh in weeks. "That's a lot of clothes for one baby," Derek smiled, relieved by her reaction. "Well, now the baby will have options." Grace, watching from the kitchen, softly murmured, "He loves you, sweetheart. He just didn't know how to show it." Later that week, Riley decided to bake again. Not for sale, just to keep busy. Derek walked into the kitchen, intrigued. "Can I help?" Riley hesitated, but eventually said, "All right." "Great, but follow my instructions," Derek said seriously, as if it were a business meeting. Riley couldn't help but laugh. "Relax. It's just a cake, not surgery." She taught him how to measure ingredients, mix the batter, grease the pan. Derek followed every step closely. But when it came time to pour the batter into the pan, he missed and half of it spilled into the sink. Riley burst into laughter. "You're a cute disaster." Derek looked at the mess and laughed too. "But I'm your disaster." Those words hung in the air. Riley stopped laughing and looked at him. Derek looked away, embarrassed. "Sorry, it just slipped out." Riley stayed silent, returned to the batter, but her heart was racing. That night, Derek couldn't sleep. He stayed in the living room, staring out the window, thinking. Then he went up to Riley's room and stopped at her door. She was sleeping soundly, her face calm, one hand resting on her stomach. He quietly entered and just stood there, watching her. "I'm afraid I'll lose you again," he whispered, more to himself than to her. But Riley didn't hear. She slept peacefully. Derek left for his room with a heavy heart. The next day, Riley sat on the porch, talking to Grace. "Mom, I don't know what to do." Grace took her daughter's hand. "Is this about Derek?" Riley nodded. "I still love him." Those words were heavy, painful. "But I don't know if I can forgive him." Grace squeezed her hand. "Love doesn't erase the pain, darling, but forgiveness can heal it." "What if he hurts me again? What if he doesn't?" "Are you going to live in fear your whole life?" Grace asked. Riley couldn't answer. From the hallway, Derek heard everything. He had been heading back from the kitchen when he stopped, frozen by the sound of her voice. Leaning against the wall, his heart pounded in his chest. She still loved him, but didn't know if she could forgive him. His eyes filled with tears, not from sadness, but from sheer resolve. He had to prove he was worthy of her love. That evening, when Riley was reading in her room, the door opened. Derek entered, serious, determined. "Riley, we need to talk." She closed her book on alert. "About what?" "About us." He stepped into the middle of the room. It was time to tell her everything. Riley sat on the bed, her heart pounding in her chest. Derek knelt in front of her, holding her hands tightly. "I love you." Riley tried to look away, but he wouldn't let her escape his gaze. "Please, just listen." She nodded, tears already starting to fall. "I was wrong. I lied. I doubted you. I investigated you. I was a coward." Derek took a deep breath. "But everything I felt, it was real. Every laugh, every conversation, every moment, it was all real." Riley sobbed quietly. "I love you," he repeated, "and I want to be the father of this child. I want to be with you. I want to build a life with you." He squeezed her hands harder. "If you give me a chance, I promise I'll be the man you deserve. I promise I'll never lie again. I promise I'll fight for us every single day." Now, Riley was crying openly, torn between love and pain. Derek pressed his forehead against her hand. "Please, Riley, give me a chance." The room fell into silence. The only sound was Riley's quiet sobs. She wanted to scream, "Yes!" She wanted to forgive him. She wanted to believe. But the fear still clung to her heart. Derek waited, holding his heart in his hands, not knowing whether he would be accepted or rejected. And Riley, looking at the man kneeling before her, realized she was facing the hardest choice of her life: forgive him or move on alone. She closed her eyes, tears falling, and whispered, "I need time." Derek nodded, accepting her answer. "I'll wait as long as it takes." He gently kissed her hand and left the room. Riley was left alone, curled up with her knees against her chest, crying. Because deep down, she already knew the answer. She just needed the courage to accept it. The next morning, Riley woke up with swollen eyes from crying. She went downstairs and saw that Derek was already preparing breakfast. He glanced at her, uncertain. "Good morning." "Good morning," Riley replied, sitting at the table and avoiding his gaze. Derek placed a plate with toast and fruit in front of her. "You need to eat for the baby." Riley nodded and began eating in silence. The atmosphere was heavy, but not hostile. A few minutes later, Derek sat across from her. "Can I tell you something?" Riley looked up. "About what?" "Why I lied." He sighed deeply. "The whole truth." Riley set her fork down, listening intently. Derek began slowly. "The arrest was unjust. My partner framed me, wanting to get rid of me. They falsified evidence, manipulated documents. I spent 6 months in prison until they proved my innocence." Riley felt her chest tighten. "When I got out, my family turned their backs on me. They said I tarnished the Barker name." He laughed bitterly. "They didn't even wait to hear the truth. Derek, they left me alone," he continued, his voice cracking. "And every woman who came after that only wanted 2 things: money or status. No one wanted the real me." Tears streamed down his face. "And then you came along." Derek looked at Riley. "You who didn't know who I really was, who didn't care about money. And I got scared that when you found out, you'd be like everyone else." Riley felt the tears fall down her own cheeks. "I would never be like that." "I know," Derek took her hand. "Now I know, but back then, fear was stronger than reason." He stood up, walked to her, and knelt down again. "You became my salvation when there was only darkness around." Derek rested his forehead against her hand. "You made me believe that there's still good in the world." Riley pulled him close, her tears flowing freely. I understand fear, but you hurt me." "I know." He held her tight. "And I will spend my entire life making it right." Riley gently pulled away, wiping her tears. "I need time, Derek. I need to learn to trust again." He nodded. "As long as it takes, I'll wait." In the days that followed, Derek kept his promise. He accompanied Riley to every medical appointment, sitting by her side, holding her hand, asking questions to the doctor. When they first heard the baby's heartbeat, Derek was overcome with emotion. "It's so fast," he whispered, astonished. Riley smiled, moved by his reaction. At home, Derek prepared healthy meals, always filled with fruits, vegetables, and protein. He left notes around the house. "Don't forget to take your vitamin D." In the fridge, freshly squeezed orange juice. "You're amazing," Riley thought, looking at the notes he'd carefully kept. One afternoon, Grace found Riley lying in bed, reading those notes. "He really is trying, isn't he?" She smiled. Riley smiled back, a hint of nostalgia in her eyes. "Yeah, he's trying. What about you?" Grace sat beside her. "Are you ready to forgive?" Riley sighed. Almost, Mom." That night, Riley lay in bed when she heard a voice in the hallway. It was Derek, quietly singing. She slowly opened the door and saw him sitting on the floor, leaning against the wall, humming softly. "Twinkle, twinkle, little star." Riley couldn't hold back a laugh. Derek froze, surprised by her appearance. "Did you hear?" "I heard," Riley smiled and approached him. "You're a terrible singer." He blushed and laughed. "I know, but I read that babies like hearing their parents' voices." Riley sat down next to him. They'll like it, even with your horrible singing. Derek smiled and, without thinking, took her hand. They sat together in the hallway in comfortable silence. In that moment, Riley realized love was starting to return. A few days later, on a rainy evening, Riley and Derek were in the living room. She was struggling to assemble the mobile for the crib, but the pieces just wouldn't fit. "This is impossible," she muttered. Derek walked over and grabbed the instructions. "Let me try." Riley raised an eyebrow. The same guy who put the bookshelf together upside down? He pretended to be offended. "That was only once." Riley laughed, and he seized the moment to steal a quick kiss. She froze, surprised. Derek stepped back, embarrassed. "Sorry, I couldn't help myself." Riley was silent for a moment before smiling. "It's okay." Derek's eyes widened. "Really?" "Really." She laid her head on his shoulder. "Maybe forgiveness isn't the end of our story. Maybe it's just the beginning." Derek's heart raced. He turned to her, gently cupping her face in his hands. "Are you sure?" Riley nodded, tears filling her eyes. "I'm sure, but promise me one thing. Anything. Never doubt me again." Derek pressed his forehead to hers. "Never, I promise." He kissed her slowly, gently, like it was their first time. When they pulled apart, they both smiled. "I love you?" Derek whispered. "I love you too," Riley replied, finally releasing the weight she'd carried in her heart. But this peace didn't last long. The next day the doorbell rang. Derek went to answer it, and Riley heard familiar voices. She slowly made her way downstairs and froze when she saw the visitors. Anthony, Rebecca, Scarlett, Dad. Her words were cold. Anthony turned and smiled. "Riley, it's so nice to see you, dear." Rebecca stepped forward with a fake smile. "We heard you're pregnant. We thought we'd visit." Scarlett rolled her eyes, but remained silent. Riley stared at them, shocked. "How did you find me?" "It wasn't hard," Rebecca replied indifferently, eyeing the mansion. "Very impressive place." Derek stood behind Riley, protectively placing his hand on her back. "How can I help?" he asked coldly. Anthony extended his hand. "Derek Barker, nice to meet you. I'm Riley's father." Derek shook his hand, his eyes icy. "I know who you are." Rebecca shot a look filled with barely concealed envy. "So it's true. You've got everything back. The wealth, the company." Derek said nothing, his gaze fixed on them, cold and unflinching. Riley could see it now, not concern but greed in their eyes. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice sharp. Anthony tried to sound sincere. "We're family, Riley. We just wanted to make sure you're all right." Riley let out a bitter laugh. "Family? Since when?" Scarlett scoffed from the corner. "See, Mom, I told you this was a waste of time." Rebecca shot her daughter a warning glance. Derek, who had been silently observing the whole scene, finally spoke up. "Isn't it interesting how people suddenly appear when gold starts to shine?" An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Anthony tried to protest. "Derek, it's not like that." Derek interrupted him, his voice cold and controlled. "And by the way, I was never really broke." Riley looked at him, stunned. Rebecca blinked in confusion. "What do you mean?" she asked. "The news about my bankruptcy was a lie, a strategy to scare off gold diggers," Derek replied calmly. "And it worked perfectly." Anthony and Rebecca exchanged awkward glances. Riley felt a wave of pride. Derek was standing up for her. Rebecca tried to pull herself together. "You lied to everyone." "Yes," Derek confirmed, his eyes never leaving Riley's. "And now I know who truly deserves my time." He looked directly at Riley, and she understood. The words were meant for her. Derek took a step forward, his gaze piercing Anthony's. "I know why you're here, and it has nothing to do with family concern." Rebecca tried to maintain composure. "Derek, you're being unfair." "Unfair?" Derek scoffed. "I know about the blackmail." Anthony paled. "What blackmail?" "The one you orchestrated with Riley," Derek said, crossing his arms. "You forced her to marry me instead of Scarlett to cover her mother's medical bills." Riley turned to him, stunned. She could see Rebecca trying to justify herself. "It's a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Riley found her voice. You blackmailed me and nearly destroyed my life. Anthony stepped forward, trying to grab her hand. Riley, sweetheart, we just wanted what was best for you. She pulled her hand away. Best? You used me as a pawn. Scarlett scoffed from the corner. Oh, stop with the dramatics. In the end, it all worked out, didn't it? Riley turned to her, fury blazing in her eyes. Worked out? You have no idea what I went through. The fear, the terror. Derek placed a protective hand on her shoulder. I think it's time for you to leave. Rebecca tried one last time. Derek, be reasonable. We're family. A family doesn't blackmail a sick daughter, he said coldly, walking toward the door and opening it. My house isn't a shelter for parasites. His words hung in the air like an explosion. Anthony tried to argue, but Riley cut him off. Oh, Rebecca, she smiled bitterly. Thanks for forcing me to marry a former millionaire, as you called him back then. Rebecca frowned, not understanding. Riley continued in a calm voice. But now, I've found the love of my life, and I'm truly happy. Not because of money, but because of character and heart. She glanced at Scarlett. And you, Scarlett. I'm not jealous or disappointed, little sister. Scarlett clenched her fists in rage. Anthony and Rebecca left silently, humiliated. Scarlett followed them, but not before loudly muttering, just so everyone could hear. If I had known Derek was still a millionaire, I'd have married him myself, not this clumsy Riley. Derek slammed the door shut with a deafening thud. Riley stood still, breathing deeply, trying to calm her racing heart. Derek wrapped his arms around her. You were amazing. Riley laughed nervously. Inside, I was trembling. You didn't show it, he said, kissing her forehead. I'm proud of you. At that moment, Grace, Riley's mom, entered the room with a wide smile. Well done, they deserve that. Riley hugged her mother, a wave of relief flooding over her. It's over, Mom, finally. A few days later, Derek prepared a surprise. When Riley came down for dinner, she saw the living room decorated with candles, simple flowers, and a carefully set table. What is this? She asked, surprised. Derek nervously adjusted his tie as he walked in. Dinner, just for the two of us. Riley was touched and smiled. Did you do all this yourself? Tyler helped, he admitted. He saved me from burning the food. Riley laughed and sat down at the table. The meal was simple but delicious. They talked, laughed, and for the first time in a long while, everything felt right. After dinner, Derek stood up and extended his hand to her. Come with me. Riley followed him onto the balcony. The city lights twinkled in the distance, beautiful and peaceful. Derek took a deep breath and turned to her. Riley Cooper, or maybe Riley Barker. She raised an eyebrow. For now, still Cooper. He smiled. Suddenly, he dropped to one knee. Riley's eyes widened. Derek! He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it. Inside was a simple but beautiful ring. I know we're already married, Derek began nervously. But back then, our wedding was just a formality, born out of desperation. It's not what you deserve. Tears sparkled in Riley's eyes. So, I'll ask again. He took her hand. Will you marry me for real? For love? Riley laughed through her tears. You're funny. So, that's a yes? Yes, she replied, pulling him toward her and kissing him. Derek slipped the ring onto her finger, and they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, gazing at the sparkling city below. 3 months passed. The wedding day had arrived. Riley was in her room, getting ready, in a simple yet elegant white dress. Grace had placed a veil on her head, holding back her tears. You look beautiful, darling. Thank you, Mom. Riley smiled nervously. There was a knock at the door. Grace opened it, looking surprised as she returned. Riley, it's your father. Riley froze. What? Antonio slowly entered, his eyes red from crying. Can we talk? Grace left the room, leaving them alone. Antonio stood awkwardly. I came to ask for your forgiveness. Riley crossed her arms, wary. For what? For what I did? His voice trembled. For the blackmail, for abandoning you, for everything. I was a terrible father. Tears welled up in Riley's eyes. You really were. I'm sorry, he sobbed. For everything I caused you and your mother. Grace didn't deserve it. Neither did you. Riley wiped her tears away. Why now? Because I realized I lost the best thing in my life. He took her hand. My daughter. She was silent for a long time. I forgive you, Dad. Antonio sighed deeply, his shoulders relaxing. Thank you. Riley hugged him for a moment, then stepped back. But I'd prefer to keep some distance for now. Antonio nodded, understanding. I respect that. He left, and Riley took a deep breath. The ceremony was simple but touching. Friends, acquaintances, and Grace, seated in the first row, were overflowing with emotion. Tyler stood next to Derek as his best man. When Riley entered, Derek's face lit up with a wide smile. Wow, he whispered. Tyler winked at him. Don't mess this up, boss. Derek laughed. During the ceremony, Tyler delivered a funny speech. When I first met Derek, he was a workaholic with no life. Now he sings children's songs in the hallway. Riley, you've worked wonders. Everyone laughed. Grace handed over the rings, her eyes brimming with emotion. When the priest declared them husband and wife, Riley looked at Derek and said, I never thought the stranger at the altar would become the love of my life. Derek kissed her and replied, and I never thought my salvation would smell like jar cakes. Riley laughed, and they kissed again, to the applause and laughter of the guests. As they walked out of the church, hand in hand, Riley looked up at the sky and whispered quietly, Thank you. Derek pulled her closer. For what? For you, she smiled. For our baby, for everything. He kissed her on the forehead. Thank you for giving me a chance. And there, under the blue sky and bright sun, their true story began. A story that started under the most difficult circumstances, but bloomed where no one expected it. True love doesn't have to be perfect. What do you think about Riley and Derek's story? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Rate the story from Tau 10. What score would you give it? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel.